you get pregnant? Is not a question anyone would ever dream of asking a straight woman. Yet, when it comes to two-mum families, curiosity often gets the better of our good manners, and it's a question gay mums face, along with, so who's the daddy, and what do they call you? I'm Sophie Neary, and Courage is Contagious is all about shining a light on the barriers and bias that exist surrounding women's health and fertility in the workplace. Now, I'm pretty sure none of us would ever mean to be biased, rude or insulting to our gay colleagues on purpose, but in fact, it happens all the time. In order to break the bias, we have to be aware of it and to know that it exists in the first place. And I know I speak for all of us when I say we want to make the workplace inclusive for everyone and for everyone to feel that they belong. Since 2002, same-sex couples in the UK have legally held the right to adopt a child. That's only 20 years ago, allowing both couples in a same-sex relationship to have their names on the adoption certificate. And what's wonderful is that now 1 in 6 adoptions are for same-sex parents. It's only since 2009, however, 2009, a measly 12 years ago, that parents of the same sex can both be named on a child's birth certificate. I am so grateful to my colleague Miriam, wife to Rachel and mummy to 3 children, who is here to share their journey of same-sex motherhood with us today. Miriam, welcome.
Hi, Sophie.
In real life, this is so exciting.
I know, it's amazing. Thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm so delighted that you're here. And I just think your story is a special one. I mean, it just fills my heart with joy. And also, it's just a really important one to share. So because today is all about learning, I'm going to ask that blooper question. And I'm going to ask you to share with us how you and Rachel actually had your 3 beautiful children. Because when you told me about it, I didn't even know it was a thing that existed, I'm embarrassed to say.
No, more than happy to share. So the way that Rachel and I chose to have our family is something we call shared motherhood, but also known as intrapartner IVF.
Wow.
Now, the main thing that's kind of different about this is that it really is a shared experience. So Rachel and I both decided that we wanted to physically carry a child. So we had a conversation around what that would mean, how that would work. But it was also really equally important to us to have some sort of biological connection to all of our children, or how many children we ended up having. We've got 3 now. But I guess what that really meant was trying to understand what are the barriers, what are the things that we have to overcome to really make that a reality. So it was a case of trying to find a way that would mean that both of us would be somehow biologically, chemically related to our children. And it was important for us to kind of emotionally feel like that. And obviously everybody's story is different.
Yeah.
But I think both of us had a really honest chat with each other and said, we don't want to feel like, well, that's my child and that's your child. How do we kind of take that barrier away for ourselves? So after looking into things, and I have to say, unfortunately, it's one of the most expensive options we went for,
Right.
is intrapartner IVF. So what that meant was taking, in our first child's instance, we took Rachel's eggs,
Yeah.
chose a donor, create an embryo, and put it in me.
Wow.
So genuinely, we felt that kind of that biological, that chemical kind of shared experience because, you know, biologically, Sophia, our first child, is Rachel's.
Great name.
Great name, thank you so much. But I guess, you know, I don't even know how to describe it. Physically, she's mine. You know, I carried her, my blood ran through her. So there's nothing about her that doesn't feel like she's not mine. And then when we had siblings, so Sophia's twin brother and sister, Theodore and Esme, we did it what we describe as the other way around.
Yeah.
So we took my eggs, same donor, made an embryo, and Rachel carried both of them. So 3 children created by the 2 of us and a donor.
I almost don't have the words to describe how that makes me feel. And, you know, isn't science incredible? And what a debt we owe to whoever pioneered this and, you know, the women who went first with it. I mean, and what a difference they have made for same-sex motherhood. You know, to give you the chance and the opportunity to completely have a family.
Totally.
together in every sense of the word.
And I think you're right in saying, you started off saying it's something that wasn't necessarily familiar to you. We come across so many people who are in same-sex couples or not, and who have no idea this is even an option. They just thought, well, I have to have IVF and that's the route I need to go down. And I think when they learn that actually it can be a shared experience, of course there are barriers, whether that be health reasons, financial, whatever, but even knowing there's an option, I think it just enlightens people and there's so many more opportunities available.
It's just incredible. And talk me through, because again, we want to focus on what this means for women in the workplace. What do managers and colleagues and employers, organisations need to know? Because perhaps some of us, although we still need to be more familiar with let's call it the standard IVF route. Actually, because it's both of you that are biologically involved, it's even more complicated, isn't it? So explain to us what as colleagues we need to know and do, but also what companies need to be aware of.
It's a great question. I think I would probably pinpoint two things. There's the physical side of things, which is understanding that these two women are going to be medically going through some sort of procedure. That could be medication, it could be appointments, it could be scans, there's all sorts of things. So I think
all of which happen during working hours.
Working hours and really intensely. The clinic that we chose, you have 2 weeks of genuinely almost living at that clinic. So unless you take it as leave, which might not be possible for some people, it's really tricky to kind of manage that. So I think there's the acknowledging that someone will need space and time to go through this and being supportive of that and understanding that, without going into, it's an emotional journey. It is an emotional journey. It's a physical journey. This person will be tired. They're going to be sort of drained of energy. They might, have working hours that are really different. So I think showing empathy and flexibility around the physical side of things.
And there's the emotional load as well,
totally.
Right? Because just because you go down the route of IVF, it doesn't mean it's going to work the first time round, does it?
You're absolutely right. I mean, I had 2 failed rounds and then a successful round when I carried our daughter. And Rach had 1 unsuccessful round before we had the twins. So, that's, I'm doing my maths now, 5 rounds between us. That's a lot of tears and that's a lot of heartache. And... bearing that load while having full-time jobs. And, it's not, we chose not to necessarily make it really public knowledge when we are trying. You wouldn't ask a straight couple, oh, did you have sex last night? How's it going? It's really emotional and it's not something you want to share with people. So I think that brings me on to the other point is the emotional side of things. If you're able to, as a company, provide things like, mental health care or counselling and support, people that are trained in this kind of field, it goes a really, really long way.
Yeah, amazing. And I remember reading about a colleague at Meta who was going through this, and she had a really simple observation, how the obvious isn't always apparent, which was, why can't we have a shelf in the women's cubicles in the toilets so that, because she was going through IVF, so that when she was preparing her needle and her drugs, she had a little shelf to put it on. Because, and I just thought, gosh, that's just one of those oversights that can be unbelievably exclusive. And maybe we could say that they're a fertility-friendly cubicle or something.
I absolutely love that idea. And again, just thinking about, and I've got visions of going back, where I would lay out some loo roll on the top of a toilet, lay out all my drugs, which obviously have to be sterile.
Of course.
Breaking open these little glass vials, which have got the drugs in, mixing it up, and I go, I've got needles now. What do I do with the needles? And I had to wrap them up, put them in my bag. I thought, what about, if your friends mentioned that, what a great idea. And what about having somewhere you could actually then put needles and the glass vials and stuff? So you have to carry them around your bag all day, just like a bin,
And I remember, because there's one of those, I love your Instagram, which is called
2 Mummies Outnumbered. Rach is the leader of this. She tells me off for not getting involved more, but yes.
Yeah, and I really encourage everyone who's watching this to follow them, because it's just enlightening and educating and also just fills your heart with joy. But I was really struck by all of the photos of the fertility drugs, and the pictures of the bruises on Rachel's tummy. And I want to celebrate her, her bravery and her vulnerability in sharing that. But again, it's just a really huge physical burden, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. And, reflecting on my own journey and thinking there were times where I was probably injecting myself 6 times a day with probably multiple needles, right, 3 or 4, maybe more different types. I think I probably vanished it from my memory, but it's a huge burden, not just physically taking them, remembering which ones to take at very specific times of the day, different dosages and all that sort of stuff. So it is a really, really big tax mentally, emotionally, physically, and Rachel's an absolute champ for doing it with 2 as well.
Oh, it really, really, yeah. I mean, I hope everyone who's watching this can. I mean, I just get goosebumps. I really do. And
do you want to babysit?
No, but your birthday parties look incredible, and I would really love to come to a birthday party. Maybe one of Sophia's, because then I can also sort of pretend it's slightly mine as well. So, final question.
Go on.
All of this obviously starts not when you go through the treatment, but when you start thinking about having a family.
Yeah.
It's more complicated for same-sex motherhood. There are more options to consider. It is more expensive. Knowing what you know now, what would you go back and tell yourself? And what would you say to all of the gay wannabe mummies out there?
Yeah. It's a really great question. One of the ones that comes up for me is setting boundaries. Yeah. And I think that's a really important one for us personally because, like yourself, with all the good intentions, people have so many questions.
Yeah.
But there are also only so many answers that I want to give because, public knowledge nowadays, I don't want our children, for example, growing up, ever having heard myself or Rachel talk about the financial cost of what it took for us to have our children because, and maybe I'm overthinking it, but I don't ever want our children to think there's a value on what it took for them to exist.
Yeah.
So for us, there are boundaries. There's certain things we're more than happy to talk about.
Except the value of love.
Exactly. And that's, you kind of hit the nail on the head. Rachel and I have said, our children could not be more wanted. We've wanted them so much and they're so loved. And I wouldn't want anything else to ever kind of tar their view of that. So I think setting boundaries is a really important one because people will want to know, because it is such an interesting journey. People say, well, where did you go? How much did it cost? How many rounds? Et cetera, et cetera. And it can feel really overwhelming. So I think setting boundaries. I also think not knowing all the answers is fine.
Yeah,
and it's something as Sophia particularly, she's getting older, she has lots of questions. She's 3.5. Of course, she's got lots of questions. And she asks, really simple things that maybe we hadn't even considered because you don't necessarily know at what age will they ask what question and how best to answer it. So I think also being kind to yourself and saying you don't have to know all the answers and it's fine to wing it a bit and ask other people, nice conversations like this, like we're having today.
And are there more books and things that help tell the story so it's not just you and Rachel having to do it?
There are, and there definitely should be more. So if anyone's an aspiring writer, please do write books and write literature and poems, whatever else. Like one of my favourite things to do with Sophia is read to her at night. Like every parent probably thinks that it will be this dreamy thing, but apart from that, she's running around the nursery and just expecting us to read 20 books. But she always gravitates to the ones where she sees herself. I think it's a really human thing to do. So there's one we call, what's it called? Heather Has Two Mummies, for example. There's another one called Mummy, Mama and Me. So just finding books that aren't, overtly about this is you, Sophia, look at you right here. But she recognises her family unit in there and she doesn't feel confused by it. And we've also, we've encouraged the nursery as well to make sure they have got books and literature. When they have things like Mother's Day, she makes 2 cards and it doesn't become a weird thing. She's like, 2 mummies, so I've got 2 cards that I need to make.
Yeah. Amazing. Miriam, we could talk for hours and hours, but it is unfortunately time to wrap up, although I really hope everyone who's watching this will feel free to comment and we can both go on and sort of answer some of the questions and comment. Only the strong can be vulnerable and courage really is contagious. When I was chatting with Miriam about this before and even more so during this conversation now, I'm just so struck by the physicality, the extra load, the mental, emotional and physical tax that I don't understand. All gay mums are going to face. And of course, the more underrepresented women are in terms of intersectionality, the more barriers and hurdles we have to overcome. So Miriam, thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you for having me.
And sharing your and Rachel's really inspirational journey with us, but also your strength and transparency. We really do rise by lifting others, and gosh, how you embody that, and what a way to normalise the conversation. I'm sure I'm not the only one who's found it incredibly inspiring. So please do comment, join in the conversation, tell us what other topics you'd like to learn and hear more about. Until then, shine on, and thank you.
Thank you.